The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand corridors of the royal residence as Queen Camilla made her way to her son Tom Parker Bowles' private quarters. What had started as a routine inspection of the family wing would soon uncover a secret that had been hidden for decades. Changing everything the royal family thought they knew about their own history, Tom had been away. On a business trip for 3 weeks, leaving his childhood bedroom untouched in the family's private section of the palace. The room held memories from his younger days, filled with photographs, books, and personal belongings that told the story of his life before his mother became queen consort. Camilla had decided to have the room refreshed as a surprise for his return, thinking it would be a thoughtful gesture. The head of security, Captain James Morrison, had served the royal family for over 20 years. His loyalty was unquestioned, and his attention to detail had prevented countless security breaches over the years. When Camilla mentioned her plans to renovate Tom's room, Morrison immediately began his standard security sweep of the area. Royal protocol demanded that any work done in the private quarters required thorough inspection of walls, floors, and hidden spaces. Morrison entered the room with his team, carrying specialized equipment designed to detect hollow spaces and structural abnormalities. The bedroom appeared ordinary at first glance, with its comfortable furniture and personal touches that made it feel like a normal family space rather than a royal chamber. However, Morrison's trained eye noticed something unusual about the wall behind Tom's old desk. The wallpaper in that section seemed slightly different from the rest of the room. It was subtle, almost invisible to an untrained observer. But Morrison had learned to spot such inconsistencies during his years of service. The pattern didn't quite align, and there was a barely noticeable difference in texture. His instincts told him this warranted closer investigation, using a small device that could detect hollow spaces behind walls. Morrison scanned the suspicious area. The readings showed a clear void behind what should have been solid wall. This discovery immediately raised security concerns. In a royal residence, any hidden space could potentially pose a threat, or contain items that needed to be secured. Morrison called for additional equipment and his most trusted team members. Royal security protocols were strict about such discoveries. Every hidden compartment, every unusual space, every structural anomaly had to be investigated thoroughly. The safety of the royal family depended on knowing every inch of their living quarters. As the team prepared their tools, Morrison contacted Queen Camilla to inform her of the unusual finding. She was initially puzzled by the call, wondering how a simple room renovation had turned into a security investigation. However, her years as part of the royal family had taught her to trust the judgment of their security personnel. The wall in question was located behind a heavy wooden desk that had been in the room for years. Tom had used this desk during his teenage years for homework and later for personal correspondence. The furniture had to be carefully moved to allow proper access to the wall section that had caught Morrison's attention. With the desk relocated, the anomaly became more apparent. The wallpaper showed clear signs of being applied over a different surface than the rest of the room. There were slight ridges and variations that suggested something had been covered up many years ago. The team's scanning equipment confirmed a substantial hollow space behind this section of wall. Morrison made the decision to proceed with opening the wall. This wasn't taken lightly, as any alteration to royal property required careful consideration. However, security concerns took priority, and the unknown nature of what lay behind the wall presented a potential risk that couldn't be ignored. The team began carefully removing the wallpaper, revealing older layers underneath. Each layer told a story of different decorating phases the room had gone through over the years. As they worked deeper, they found that the wall itself had been modified at some point in the past. A section had been bricked up and then concealed with plaster and wallpaper. Queen Camilla arrived at the room as the investigation was underway. She watched with growing curiosity as her security team methodically worked to uncover whatever had been hidden behind Tom's bedroom wall. The careful, professional manner of their work did nothing to calm her increasing anxiety about what they might find. The bricks behind the wallpaper were old, clearly installed many years before Tom had ever used the room. The mortar was aged and had the appearance of work done decades ago. This meant that whatever was behind this wall had been hidden long before her family had any connection to this particular residence. As Morrison prepared to remove the first brick, he paused to ensure that Queen Camilla was prepared for whatever they might discover. Royal residences had long histories, and hidden compartments often contained items that could range from valuable artifacts to documents that might reveal uncomfortable truths about past occupants. The moment arrived when the first brick was carefully extracted from the wall. Behind it, they could see into a dark space that had been sealed away from light and air for what appeared to be many years. Morrison used a flashlight to peer into the opening. Trying to determine the size and contents of the hidden compartment, what he saw in that first glimpse would begin a discovery process that none of them could have anticipated. The hidden space contained items that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the history of this room and the people who had occupied it before them. Morrison's flashlight beam revealed a carefully preserved space that had been sealed away from the world for decades. The hidden compartment was larger than expected, extending several feet into the wall space. What caught his immediate attention were numerous items wrapped in protective cloth. Arranged as if someone had taken great care to preserve them for future discovery, Queen Camilla moved closer as Morrison began the delicate process of removing items from the hidden space. The first object he extracted was a wooden box, ornately carved and clearly very old. The craftsmanship suggested it was valuable, possibly an antique that had been deliberately hidden rather than displayed. The wood showed signs of age, but had been remarkably preserved by the sealed environment. The security team documented each item as it was removed. Following standard protocol for any discovery in royal property, Morrison handed the wooden box to Queen Camilla, who examined it with growing fascination. The carvings depicted what appeared to be family crests and symbols that seemed vaguely familiar, though she couldn't immediately place their significance behind the wooden box. Morrison discovered several bundles wrapped in what appeared to be silk cloth. The fabric was old, but had protected whatever lay beneath from damage over the years. Each bundle was carefully secured with ribbons that had faded with age but still held their contents together. The care taken in wrapping these items suggested they held significant value to whoever had hidden them. As Queen Camilla carefully unwrapped the first bundle, she gasped at what she found inside. A collection of photographs, clearly very old, showed people in formal dress from what appeared to be the early 1900s. The faces in the photographs looked remarkably familiar, bearing strong resemblances to members of the current royal family. The clothing and setting suggested these were official or ceremonial occasions. Morrison continued removing items from the hidden compartment while Queen Camilla studied the photographs. Among them, she found images of children who looked strikingly similar to Tom and his sister Laura when they were young. The resemblance was so strong that it sent chills down her spine. These photographs predated her family's connection to the royal residence by many decades. The next bundle contained documents written in elegant handwriting on paper that had yellowed with age. The formal language and official seals suggested these were important legal or family documents. Some appeared to be birth certificates, while others looked like marriage records or property deeds. The dates on the documents confirmed they were from the early 1900s. Queen Camilla's hands trembled slightly as she began to read through the documents. The names on the papers included surnames that she recognized from Tom's family tree, but the timeline didn't make sense according to what she knew about their family history. These documents suggested connections to the royal residence that predated anything she had been told about her family's background. Morrison discovered a leather-bound journal. Buried deeper in the compartment, the journal was thick, clearly containing many years of entries and showed signs of frequent use. The leather cover was embossed with initials that made Queen Camilla's heart race when she saw them. The letters matched those of Tom's great-grandfather, a man about whom very little family history had ever been shared. As Queen Camilla opened the journal, she found page after page of detailed entries written in the same elegant handwriting they had seen on the official documents. The entries were dated and appeared to chronicle daily life in the royal residence. During the early 1900s, the writer clearly lived in the house and had intimate knowledge of its occupants and their activities. The journal entries revealed that Tom's great-grandfather had not been a distant relative with minimal connection to the royal family, as they had always been told. Instead, the entries suggested he had been a significant figure in the household, possibly holding an important position that had been deliberately obscured in later family histories. Morrison found additional items wrapped in cloth, including pieces of jewelry that appeared to be heirlooms of considerable value. The jewelry was ornate and clearly designed for formal occasions. Some pieces bore the same family crests they had seen carved into the wooden box. The quality and style suggested these were items that would have been worn by someone of high social standing. Queen Camilla examined the jewelry pieces with growing amazement. Several items looked remarkably similar to pieces she had seen in official royal portraits hanging in other parts of the residence. The connection was unmistakable, yet completely unexpected. How could her family have possessed items that matched royal jewelry from decades past? The documents in the compartment included what appeared to be correspondence between Tom's great-grandfather and various members of the royal household from that era. The letters were formal but suggested a level of familiarity and respect that went far beyond what would be expected for a distant relative or casual acquaintance. Morrison removed the final items from the hidden compartment. He discovered a sealed envelope that had been placed at the very back of the space. The envelope was marked with instructions that it should only be opened by a family member, and it bore the same family crest they had seen on other items. The weight and thickness of the envelope suggested it contained something of particular importance. Queen Camilla held the sealed envelope with great trepidation. The formal wax seal was unbroken, suggesting that whatever information it contained had been waiting for decades to be discovered. The instructions written on the envelope were clear that its contents were meant for family members only, and the gravity of that responsibility weighed heavily on her. The discovery had already revealed far more than anyone could have anticipated when Morrison began his routine security sweep. The items suggested a family history that had been hidden or forgotten, connections to the royal residence that predated anything in their known family records, and relationships that had been deliberately obscured over the years. Morrison carefully sealed the opening in the wall temporarily while decisions were made about how to proceed. The discovery had transformed from a simple security investigation into something that could potentially rewrite what the family understood about their own history. The weight of these revelations was evident on Queen Camilla's face as she gathered the discovered items. The implications of what they had found were staggering. If the documents and photographs were authentic, they suggested that Tom's family had connections to the royal residence and the royal family that went back generations. These connections had been hidden so thoroughly that no living family member had any knowledge of them. Queen Camilla retreated to her private study with the discovered items, her mind racing with questions about what these revelations might mean for her family. She spread the photographs across her desk, studying each face with intense concentration. The resemblances to her children were undeniable, yet these images were taken decades before Tom and Laura were even born. The leather journal drew her attention first. She opened it carefully to the earliest entries, dated from 1923. The handwriting belonged to someone named Edward Parker Bowles, a name that made her heart stop. This was definitely Tom's great-grandfather, but the journal revealed he was living in the royal residence as more than just a visitor or distant relative. The early entries described daily routines within the royal household with the familiarity of someone who belonged there. Edward wrote about breakfast meetings with senior royal staff, his responsibilities overseeing certain household operations, and his participation in important family decisions. These were not the writings of an outsider, but of someone who held a position of trust and authority within the royal family structure. As queen, Camilla read deeper into the journal. She discovered entries that mentioned Edward's wife, Margaret, and their young children. The descriptions of the children's activities, their education within the residence, and their interactions with other royal family members painted a picture of a family that was fully integrated into royal life during that era. One entry from 1925 particularly caught her attention. Edward wrote about a family crisis that required discretion and careful handling. He described his role in managing a sensitive situation that could have caused scandal if it became public knowledge. The entry suggested that Edward held a position of significant responsibility and was trusted with the most delicate family matters. The photographs began to make more sense as Queen Camilla cross-referenced them with journal entries. Several images showed Edward and Margaret at formal royal events, standing in positions that indicated they held important roles in the household. Other photographs captured casual family moments, showing Edward's children playing with other royal children in settings that suggested they were all part of the same extended family. Queen Camilla found birth certificates among the documents that revealed information her family had never known. Tom's grandfather had been born in the royal residence, not in the modest family home she had always been told about. The birth certificate listed Edward Parker Bowles as holding an official title within the royal household, a position that had never been mentioned in any family stories. Marriage certificate for Edward and Margaret showed that their wedding had taken place in the royal chapel with several senior royal family members serving as witnesses. This was clearly not the marriage of distant relatives, but of people who were central to royal family life. The elaborate signatures and official seals confirmed the authenticity of the document. Further reading of the journal revealed that Edward had been responsible for managing certain royal estates and had been involved in important financial decisions for the royal family. His position appeared to be that of a trusted advisor and administrator, someone who handled sensitive matters that required both competence and absolute discretion. Queen Camilla discovered correspondence that showed Edward maintaining regular communication with senior royal family members, even after he had moved away from the residence. The letters indicated that his departure had not been due to any falling out, but rather was part of a deliberate plan to protect the royal family from potential embarrassment during a period of political sensitivity. The jewelry pieces found in the hidden compartment were revealed through the journal to be gifts from the royal family to Edward and Margaret in recognition of their service and loyalty. Several entries described formal ceremonies where these items were presented, along with expressions of gratitude for their dedication to the family's welfare. One particularly emotional journal entry from 1931 described Edward's decision to remove his family from active royal service. He wrote about receiving instructions to relocate quietly, to allow their connection to the royal family to fade from public memory. This was presented not as punishment, but as a necessary sacrifice to protect the institution during turbulent political times. The journal explained that Edward had agreed to this arrangement because of his loyalty to the royal family and his understanding of the greater good. He wrote about the pain of leaving behind the life they had known, but also about his pride in having served the family faithfully when they needed him most. His final entries from the residence showed a man preparing to give up everything he had known for the benefit of others. Queen Camilla found entries describing how Edward had carefully hidden these family treasures and documents before departing. He wrote about his hope that future generations would someday discover the truth about their family's role in royal history. The hiding place had been chosen deliberately, in a room that would remain part of the family wing where his descendants might eventually reside. The sealed envelope that Morrison had discovered last contained Edward's final message to his descendants. Queen Camilla broke the wax seal with trembling hands, knowing that she was about to read words that had waited nearly a century to be discovered. The envelope contained several pages of Edward's careful handwriting. Addressed to future family members, Edward's letter explained the full scope of his family's connection to the royal household and the circumstances that had led to their quiet departure. He described his role as a confidential advisor and administrator, trusted with sensitive information that could never be made public. His family had lived as part of the royal household for over a decade, fully integrated into royal life. The letter revealed that Edward's departure had been coordinated with the highest levels of the royal family as part of a broader strategy to simplify royal connections during a period of political uncertainty. Several families who had served in similar capacities had been asked to step back from public royal life while maintaining their private connections and loyalty. Edward's final paragraphs expressed his hope that his descendants would understand the sacrifice his generation had made and would take pride in their family's service to the crown. He wrote about his confidence that future generations would prove themselves worthy of their heritage. Even if that heritage had to remain hidden for many years, Queen Camilla sat in stunned silence as she finished reading Edward's letter. The implications of this discovery went far beyond simple family history. If this information became public, it would reshape understanding of royal family connections. It might raise questions about the legitimacy of various family lines and their relationships to the crown. Weight of this knowledge felt overwhelming. Queen Camilla realized that she was now the keeper of a family secret that had been successfully hidden for nearly a century. The decision about what to do with this information would affect not only her own family, but potentially the broader royal family and the institution itself. Queen Camilla knew she could not keep this monumental discovery to herself. The implications were too significant and the emotional weight too heavy to bear alone. She made the difficult decision to contact King Charles, knowing that this revelation would affect the entire royal family. Her hands shook as she dialed his private number. Unsure how to begin explaining what had been uncovered, King Charles arrived at the residence within the hour. His expression grave as Queen Camilla led him to her study where the discovered items were carefully laid out. She had organized everything chronologically, allowing the story to unfold naturally through the photographs, documents, and journal entries. The silence in the room was profound as Charles began to examine each piece of evidence. The king studied the photographs with intense concentration, his royal training allowing him to spot details that others might miss. He recognized background settings from various royal properties and noted the formal positioning of people in group photographs that indicated their relative importance within the household structure. The evidence was compelling and clearly authentic as Charles read through Edward's journal entries. His understanding of royal family history from that era began to shift dramatically. He had always been taught that the 1920s and 1930s were periods when the royal family had simplified their household structure. But these documents suggested that the reality had been much more complex than official histories indicated. The birth certificates and marriage records provided irrefutable evidence of the Parker Bowles family's deep integration into royal life during that period. Charles recognized several of the witnesses and officials whose signatures appeared on the documents. These were not people who would have participated in ceremonies for distant relatives or casual acquaintances. Queen Camilla watched her husband's face as he processed the magnitude of what they had discovered. The journal entries revealed that Edward Parker Bowles had been present for and involved in several significant royal family decisions that Charles had learned about in his royal education. The perspective from Edward's writings provided insights into events that had previously been understood only from official royal archives. King Charles was particularly struck by Edward's detailed accounts of his administrative responsibilities. The journal showed that Edward had been entrusted with managing sensitive financial matters and had participated in strategic planning for the royal family's future. This level of responsibility was only given to individuals who were considered family members or the most trusted advisors. The correspondence between Edward and senior royal family members revealed relationships that went far beyond professional interactions. The letters showed genuine affection and concern for Edward's welfare and that of his family. Several letters expressed regret about the necessity of Edward stepping back from his active role in royal life. As King Charles read Edward's final letter to his descendants, tears began to form in his eyes. The sacrifice described in those pages represented a level of loyalty and dedication that moved him deeply. Edward had given up everything he had known and loved for the benefit of the royal institution, asking nothing in return except that his descendants understand the pride they should feel in their heritage. The realization that Tom Parker Bowles was directly descended from someone who had played such a significant role in royal family life changed everything Charles thought he knew about his stepson's background. Tom had grown up believing his family had only distant connections to royal life, but the evidence showed that royal service was literally in his bloodline. Queen Camilla shared her concerns about how this discovery should be handled. The information was sensitive, not only because it affected their family, but because it could raise questions about other family histories that might have been similarly obscured for political or social reasons during that era? The implications extended far beyond their immediate family circle. King Charles agreed that the discovery required careful consideration and consultation with royal historians and legal experts. The authenticity of the documents would need to be verified, although the evidence appeared overwhelming. More importantly, they needed to understand the full implications of making this information public versus keeping it private. The emotional impact on Tom would be substantial regardless of how they proceeded. Learning that his great-grandfather had been a central figure in royal life, rather than the distant relative he had always believed, would fundamentally change his understanding of his own identity and place within the royal family structure. King Charles and Queen Camilla decided that Tom needed to be informed immediately, before any decisions were made about broader disclosure. They owed him the truth about his heritage. He deserved to be part of the decision-making process about how to handle this information. His perspective as Edward's direct descendant would be crucial. They also recognized that Tom's sister Laura would need to be informed, as this discovery affected her heritage equally. The siblings had always known they had some distant royal connections through their mother's marriage, but learning that they had direct bloodline connections to royal service would be life-changing for both of them. The practical implications were also significant. If Tom's family had legitimate historical connections to royal properties and positions, there might be legal or financial considerations that needed to be addressed. The document suggested that Edward had owned certain property rights that might still have legal standing. King Charles was also concerned about the historical accuracy of official royal records from that era. If Edward's role had been deliberately minimized or erased from official histories, there might be other similar cases that deserved investigation. The integrity of royal historical records was important for future generations. Queen Camilla expressed her fear that this discovery might somehow diminish Tom's accomplishments or suggest that his position within the royal family was based on hidden bloodline connections, rather than his own merits and his mother's marriage to Charles. She wanted to ensure that Tom understood. This discovery enhanced rather than explained his place in the family as they continued to discuss the implications. Both Charles and Camilla realized that this discovery represented an opportunity to honor Edward's memory and sacrifice. For nearly a century, his service and loyalty had gone unrecognized. Perhaps the time had come to acknowledge his contributions, while being respectful of the reasons his family had stepped back from public royal life. The decision about when and how to tell Tom weighed heavily on both of them. This was information that would change his life permanently, and they wanted to ensure they approached the conversation with the sensitivity and care it deserved. They also needed to be prepared for Tom's questions about why this information had been hidden for so long. King Charles suggested that they should contact Tom immediately and ask him to return from his business trip. This was not information that could be shared over the phone or delayed until his scheduled return. The magnitude of the discovery required a face-to-face conversation in a setting where Tom would have privacy to process the emotional impact. Tom Parker Bowles received the urgent call from his mother while attending a business meeting in Edinburgh. Queen Camilla's voice carried an unusual tone that immediately caught his attention. She asked him to return to the residence as soon as possible, explaining only that something important had been discovered in his old bedroom that required his immediate attention. The mysterious nature of the request left Tom puzzled but concerned enough to cancel his remaining meetings. During the flight back to London, Tom's mind raced with possibilities about what could have been found in his childhood room that would warrant such urgency. He had lived in that room for years during his youth. Couldn't imagine what discovery could be significant enough to require his immediate return from a business trip. The anxiety in his mother's voice suggested this was far more serious than any routine matter. Tom arrived at the residence that evening to find both his mother and King Charles waiting. For him and Queen Camilla's private study, the formal setting and their serious expressions immediately told him that whatever they needed to discuss would be life-changing. He noticed items spread across the desk that looked old and valuable, including photographs and documents that seemed to be from many decades past. Queen Camilla began by explaining the circumstances that had led to the discovery. She described Morrison's security sweep, the unusual wall section, and the subsequent uncovering of the hidden compartment behind his bedroom wall. Tom listened with growing amazement as she detailed the careful process of removing items that had been sealed away for nearly a century. As his mother showed him the first photographs, Tom's expression changed from curiosity to shock. The faces looking back at him from images taken in the 1920s bore such strong resemblances to himself and his sister that the connection was undeniable. These were clearly his ancestors, but they were photographed in royal settings that contradicted everything he had been told about his family's background. King. Charles handed Tom the leather journal, explaining that it had belonged to his great-grandfather, Edward Parker Bowles. Tom had heard Edward's name mentioned only occasionally in family conversations, always as a distant relative about whom little was known. The idea that Edward had left behind a detailed record of his life was surprising enough, but the implications of where that record had been found were staggering. Tom opened the journal with trembling hands and began reading. Edward's entries about daily life within the royal household, the intimate knowledge of royal family routines, and the casual way Edward wrote about interactions with senior royal family members made it clear that he had been far more than a distant relative. These were the writings of someone who lived and worked at the heart of royal life. The birth certificates and official documents provided concrete evidence that Tom's family history had been fundamentally different from what he had always believed. Learning that his grandfather had been born in the royal residence, rather than in the modest family home he had always heard about, challenged his entire understanding of his heritage and identity. Queen Camilla watched her son's face as he processed each revelation. She could see the emotional impact of learning that his family's connection to royal life went back generations rather than beginning with her marriage to Charles. The pride he felt in discovering his ancestors' service was mixed with confusion. About why this history had been hidden, Tom was particularly moved by Edward's detailed accounts of his responsibilities and the trust placed in him by the royal family. The journal revealed a man who had dedicated his life to serving the crown with integrity and discretion. Reading about Edward's involvement in significant royal family decisions gave Tom a new perspective on his own place within the royal family structure. The correspondence between Edward and other royal family members showed genuine affection and respect that went far beyond professional relationships. Tom could see that his great-grandfather had been valued not just for his competence but for his character and loyalty. This personal dimension of the historical record made the discovery even more emotionally significant when Tom read Edward's final letter to his descendants. Tears streamed down his face. The sacrifice described in those pages represented a level of devotion that was both inspiring and heartbreaking. Edward had given up his position, his home, and his place in royal life for the good of the institution, asking only that future generations understand the honor of their heritage. The realization that this discovery had been waiting in his own bedroom all these years seemed almost impossible to believe. Tom had slept in that room, studied at the desk that concealed the hidden compartment, and lived his daily life just feet away from evidence that would completely reshape his understanding of who he was and where he came from. King Charles explained the historical context that had led to Edward's quiet departure from royal service. The political sensitivities of the early 1930s had made it necessary for several families connected to the royal household to step back from public roles while maintaining their private loyalty. Edward's family had been among those asked to make this sacrifice. Tom struggled to comprehend why his family had never been told about this history. He understood the historical reasons for Edward's departure. He couldn't understand why the knowledge of his service hadn't been passed down through the family. The deliberate concealment of this information had robbed several generations of the pride they should have felt in their ancestors' dedication. Queen Camilla explained that Edward's letter suggested he had expected this information to eventually be discovered, but circumstances had prevented previous generations from finding the hidden compartment. The room had gone through several renovations over the decades, but none had involved the specific wall section where Edward had concealed his family's treasures. The emotional weight of the discovery was overwhelming for Tom. Learning about Edward's sacrifice made him feel a deeper connection to royal service and responsibility. At the same time, he felt grief for the great-grandfather he had never truly known, and for the family history that had been lost for so many years. Tom asked detailed questions about each item. Wanting to understand every aspect of Edward's life and service, he studied the photographs carefully, trying to imagine what life had been like for his great-grandfather during those years of dedicated royal service. The reality of Edward's experience was far more significant than anything Tom had previously imagined about his family background. The discovery fundamentally changed Tom's understanding of his relationship to the royal family. He had always seen himself as connected through his mother's marriage, but now he realized that royal service was part of his bloodline heritage. This knowledge brought both pride and a sense of responsibility that he had never felt before. As the evening progressed, Tom expressed his desire to learn everything possible about Edward's life and service. The journal provided extensive detail, but Tom wanted to research historical records to understand the full context of his great-grandfather's role and the circumstances that had led to his family stepping back from royal life. The following weeks brought intensive research as royal historians and genealogy experts worked to verify and contextualize the discovered documents. Every piece of evidence was examined thoroughly, with particular attention paid to confirming the authenticity of Edward's journal and the official documents found in the hidden compartment. The verification process revealed additional details about Edward's role that made his contributions even more remarkable than the family had initially realized. Royal archivists discovered references to Edward Parker Bowles in previously sealed historical records that confirmed his significant position within the royal household. Official correspondence from that era stored in royal archives corroborated the journal entries and provided additional context about the sensitive nature of his responsibilities. These findings established beyond doubt that Edward had been a key figure in royal administration during a crucial period in royal family history. Tom worked closely with the research team, providing family information that helped piece together the complete story of Edward's life before and after his royal service. The investigation revealed that Edward's departure from royal life had been part of a broader restructuring that affected several trusted families. His sacrifice had been recognized at the highest levels. Though that recognition had been kept private for political reasons, the emotional impact of these discoveries extended beyond Tom to affect his entire family. His sister Laura traveled to the residence to see the items and read Edward's journal for herself. Like Tom, she was moved to tears by their great-grandfather's final letter and struggled to process the magnitude of their family's hidden heritage. The siblings spent hours discussing how this knowledge changed their understanding of themselves and their place within the royal family. King Charles made the decision to have Edward's contributions officially recognized within royal family records, even if that recognition remained private. He arranged for a formal acknowledgement of Edward's service to be placed in the royal archives, ensuring that future generations would have access to the complete historical record. This gesture honored Edward's memory while respecting the reasons for his family's historical discretion. Queen Camilla worked with royal estate managers to determine the appropriate handling of Edward's former living quarters and possessions. The hidden compartment was preserved as it had been found, with the opening carefully restored but left accessible for future family members. The items discovered were cataloged and placed in secure storage where they could be properly preserved for posterity. The jewelry and valuable items found in the compartment were evaluated by royal collection experts, who confirmed their historical significance and substantial value. Several pieces were identified as having been presented to Edward during formal recognition ceremonies, as described in his journal. The family decided these items should remain, with Tom and Laura as their rightful inheritance from their great-grandfather. Tom struggled with the decision about whether to share this discovery publicly or keep it within the family. The historical significance of the information was substantial, but he also felt protective of Edward's privacy and the reasons his family had chosen to step back from public royal life. After extensive discussion with historians and family members, he decided that Edward's story deserved to be told, but in a way that honored his sacrifice and discretion. The research revealed that Edward's administrative work had involved managing several royal properties and overseeing sensitive financial arrangements during a period of economic uncertainty. His competence and trustworthiness had made him invaluable to the royal family during challenging times. The historical record showed that his advice had influenced several important decisions that had benefited the royal institution. A particularly moving discovery was a letter from a senior royal family member to Edward, expressing profound gratitude for his service and regret about the necessity of his departure. The letter emphasized that Edward's sacrifice was recognized and appreciated, and that his family's welfare would always be a concern of the royal family. This correspondence provided closure for questions about whether Edward's departure had been voluntary or forced. Tom decided to establish a private family archive to preserve Edward's memory and ensure that future generations would know about their ancestors' remarkable service. The archive would include not only the discovered items, but also the results of ongoing research into Edward's life and the historical context of